Hello dear friends. Welcome back to our channel. As usual, prepare a cup of hot tea to sip while listening to an interesting story that I bring to you today. Are you ready? Let's get started. Today's story is about the young billionaire believed he was being married off to an unattractive bride in a prearranged marriage. However, when she lifted her veil, the truth stunned him. The grand dining hall of the estate shimmered with the warm glow of an elaborate chandelier. The table, designed to host 20, had only 3 occupants. Nathan sat at one end, his posture casual but his expression tense with frustration. Across from him, his father calmly sipped his wine, the picture of composure, while his mother observed him with a watchful gaze, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "This can't be happening," Nathan finally broke the silence, sliding his untouched plate of cold steak aside. His voice carried a sharp edge of disbelief. "This isn't a suggestion, Nathan," his father replied, his tone even. "It's a decision, one already made." Nathan ran a hand through his dark hair, leaning back in his chair. "A decision made for me? How considerate." "Enough with the sarcasm," his mother interjected, her voice clipped. "This isn't just about you. It's about preserving the family, the legacy we've built." Nathan's gaze hardened. "And the way to do that is to marry me off like we're living in medieval times? To someone I've never even met?" "You'll meet her soon enough," his father replied, setting his glass down. "Lila comes from a respectable family. This alliance benefits us all." Nathan let out a short laugh. "A respectable family? Is that why she hides behind a veil? What's the big secret? A scar? A second identity?" "Don't be cruel," his mother snapped, her voice stern but strained. "Lila is a private person, and she has her reasons. She owes you no explanation." "No," Nathan shot back, "but apparently, I owe her a lifetime. Why not marry her off to someone willing to play this ridiculous game?" "Because you are the heir," his father said with finality. "And this marriage strengthens the partnership between our families." Nathan scoffed. "So, it's not a marriage. It's a business deal." "Stop being dramatic," his mother said, her tone softening slightly. "No one's asking you to fall in love, just to respect her and fulfill your responsibility." Nathan clenched his fists. "My responsibility? To marry a stranger? To give up control over my future?" "You'll have everything you could ever need," his father countered calmly. "And so will she." Standing abruptly, Nathan pushed his chair back, its legs scraping loudly against the floor. "I don't need this," he muttered, his voice simmering with anger. "I don't need her." "You'll meet her tomorrow at dinner," his mother said with a tone of finality. "And I expect you to act like the man we raised you to be." Nathan said nothing, his jaw clenched as he left the room, the weight of his parents' expectations bearing down on him. Upstairs in his suite, Nathan poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared out at the twinkling city lights. The anger burned in his chest. An arranged marriage to a woman who wouldn't even reveal her face? It felt absurd, like a bad joke from a bygone era. "Tomorrow," he thought bitterly, downing the whiskey. "Tomorrow, I'll see what this is really about. But they won't make this easy for me." The next evening, the estate buzzed with quiet preparation for the dinner. Nathan arrived in the formal sitting room, his expression carefully neutral, though his frustration still lingered beneath the surface. His father acknowledged him with a nod, and his mother offered a faint smile. "She'll be here soon," she said, smoothing the fabric of her gown. "Wonderful," Nathan muttered, adjusting his cuffs. Moments later, the sound of heels against the polished floors signaled her arrival. Nathan turned to see a poised young woman entering, escorted by an older gentleman, one of the Whitman family's senior members. Her movements were graceful, her posture impeccable. A long veil covered her face, leaving only her sharp, striking gray eyes visible. "Nathan," his mother said, stepping forward. "This is Lila." Lila inclined her head, her voice calm but firm. "It's a pleasure to meet you." Nathan hesitated, offering his hand automatically but unable to mask his skepticism. "Likewise," he replied, his tone flat. The atmosphere around the dinner table was stilted, the small talk between their parents feeling more like a performance than a conversation. Nathan's focus drifted repeatedly to Lila. The grace in her movements, the steadiness of her voice, and the enigmatic veil that hid her face. Midway through the meal, he set down his fork, his irritation bubbling to the surface. He turned to her and spoke, his voice low but cutting. "You don't need to keep that on," he said. "No one here will judge you." His mother's warning glance didn't faze him. Lila, however, was unfazed. Her piercing eyes met his calmly. "I appreciate your concern, but I prefer to keep it on," Lila said softly, her voice steady. Nathan raised an eyebrow, a spark of irritation flashing across his face. "Why? Are you hiding something?" "Nathan," his mother hissed, her tone sharp with disapproval. "It's fine," Lila interjected, her voice unwavering. She turned to Nathan, her gray eyes meeting his without flinching. "I'm not hiding anything that matters. What's under the veil is irrelevant to this arrangement." Nathan leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. "Arrangement? That's an interesting choice of words for marriage." Lila tilted her head slightly, her tone as composed as ever. "Isn't that what this is? Your family needs an alliance, and so does mine. There's no point complicating it with unnecessary emotions or expectations." Her words landed like a slap. Nathan stared at her, momentarily stunned. "So that's how you see it?" he asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. "No love, no compassion, just a business deal?" Lila's calm gaze didn't waver. "Do you see it differently?" Nathan opened his mouth to respond but found himself at a loss for words. Her composure unnerved him, her detachment like a mirror reflecting his own anger and confusion. "I want to know who I'm marrying," he said finally, his voice quieter but still firm. "Not just your name or your family. I want to know you." Lila studied him for a moment before replying. "In time, perhaps. But for now, all you need to know is that I understand my role in this union. I hope you'll understand yours." Her words struck a nerve. Nathan clenched his fists, his face flushing with anger. Before he could reply, Lila's father cleared his throat, breaking the tension. "Perhaps we should move on to dessert," he suggested, his tone light but firm. The rest of the evening passed in awkward formality. Nathan's parents attempted to smooth over the tension, while Lila remained poised and inscrutable. When the evening finally ended, Nathan walked Lila and her father to the door. As she turned to leave, he couldn't stop himself. "Why do you act like none of this matters?" he asked, his voice low and edged with frustration. Lila paused, her hand resting on the doorframe. She turned her head slightly, her gray eyes meeting his. "It matters," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Just not in the way you think." And with that, she stepped out into the night, leaving Nathan standing there, his frustration mingling with a flicker of curiosity he couldn't shake. The morning of the wedding was a spectacle of grandeur and opulence. The venue is a sprawling estate adorned with fresh flowers and glittering chandeliers, hosted a crowd of well-dressed guests exchanging pleasantries and whispers. Nathan stood at the altar, his posture rigid, his expression a mixture of frustration and resignation. The ceremony, though extravagant, felt hollow to him, nothing more than a performance. When Lila entered, draped in an ornate white gown with her veil firmly in place, the room fell silent. Her graceful movements and commanding presence captivated the audience, though her hidden face remained the subject of hushed speculation. "She still won't take it off," someone whispered. Maybe there's a reason, another murmured. Nathan clenched his jaw, his anger bubbling just below the surface. The ceremony proceeded with mechanical precision. Vows were exchanged, rings were placed on fingers, and the officiant declared them husband and wife. "You may kiss the bride," the officiant announced warmly. Nathan hesitated, glancing at Lila. She inclined her head slightly, but made no move to lift her veil. With a resigned sigh, he pressed a brief, perfunctory kiss to the fabric covering her cheek. Polite applause followed, but Nathan could feel the weight of judgment in the room. The reception was a lavish affair held in a grand ballroom filled with champagne, music, and laughter. Yet, the distance between Nathan and Lila remained palpable. They sat side by side at the head table, but felt worlds apart. Nathan sipped his drink in silence, his frustration growing as snippets of conversation reached his ears. Why won't she show her face? She must be hiding something. Can you imagine marrying someone like that, just for business? His jaw tightened as the words cut through the celebratory air like shards of glass. Lila, however, seemed unfazed. Her posture was elegant, her veil still firmly in place, as though the whispers and judgment couldn't touch her. When the evening finally came to an end, Nathan and Lila were escorted to the private suite prepared for them. The tension was suffocating as they entered the room and closed the door behind them. Nathan shrugged off his jacket, tossing it onto a chair. His frustration, simmering all day, finally boiled over. "Are you ever going to show me who you really are? Are you planning to keep that thing on forever?" Nathan demanded, gesturing toward Lila's veil. Lila calmly removed her gloves, placing them neatly on the dresser. "Until I'm ready," she replied evenly. Nathan let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Ready for what? To reveal whatever you're hiding? Or are you just enjoying playing this little game?" Lila turned to face him, her eyes steady behind the veil. "This isn't a game, Nathan, and I'm not hiding anything that matters. Not to you, maybe," he shot back, his voice rising. "But I'm the one standing there while people whisper about my wife like she's some kind of unsolvable mystery. Do you even understand what that feels like?" Her gaze didn't falter. "If their opinions matter more to you than I do, then maybe you should reconsider what this marriage is about," she said coolly. Nathan's anger faltered, her words striking deeper than he expected. He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I just want to know the truth, Lila. Why won't you let me see you?" "When the time is right," she said simply. "And who decides that?" "I do." Her tone was unwavering. Nathan stared at her, his frustration and confusion tangling into a knot he couldn't untie. Finally, he turned away, pouring himself a glass of whiskey from the suite's bar. "Fine," he muttered, his voice clipped. "Keep your secrets, but don't expect me to wait forever." Lila didn't respond. Instead, she sat down at the vanity, removing her earrings with practiced care. Her silence was heavy, filling the room like a physical weight. Nathan downed his drink in one gulp, the burn doing little to ease the ache in his chest. This wasn't the life he had imagined. Yet, as he watched her from across the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Lila than she let on. The night passed with them on opposite sides of the suite, the distance between them as vast as ever. But in the stillness before sleep, Nathan found himself wondering, not for the first time, what lay beneath the veil. The days following their awkward union passed in a blur of polite distance and silence. Nathan avoided Lila as much as possible, spending hours in his office or taking long drives to escape the suffocating confines of the estate. Yet, despite his frustration, he couldn't help but notice her in small, unexpected ways. The way she moved through the house with grace and quiet authority, or how the staff seemed to respond to her with a respect he hadn't anticipated. One late morning, while Nathan was in the sunlit study sifting through documents for a merger proposal that seemed destined for failure, he heard an unexpected voice. "Need some help?" Startled, Nathan looked up to see Lila standing in the doorway. She wore a simple dress that flowed gracefully over her frame, her veil still concealing her face. "I didn't realize you were there," he said tersely. "This isn't exactly your area of expertise." Lila tilted her head slightly, her tone calm and measured. "You might be surprised." Before he could protest, she stepped closer, her presence quiet yet commanding. Picking up one of the documents, she skimmed the text with gloved fingers. "The issue isn't the numbers," she said after a moment. "It's this clause. The language is too ambiguous, which is making the other party hesitate." Nathan frowned, leaning closer to see where she was pointing. "You think that's what's holding them back?" "I don't think," she replied. "I know. Tighten the language, clarify the terms, and they'll sign." Nathan stared at her, surprised. "How do you even know that?" Lila set the paper down, her posture relaxed. "I may not be part of your world, Nathan, but that doesn't mean I don't understand it." With that, she turned and left, leaving Nathan to stare after her, her words sinking in. A few days later, Nathan encountered her in an unexpected setting. He was walking through the garden on his way to the garage when he heard laughter drifting from the kitchen. Curious, he paused at the doorway and peered inside. Lila stood near the counter, her veil still in place, chatting warmly with the kitchen staff. "You've outdone yourself with the pastries today, Mrs. Hale," Lila said, her tone sincere. "They look almost too good to eat." The head cook beamed. "Oh, you flatter me, Mrs. Whitmore. But it's true, isn't it? I've been perfecting that recipe for weeks." Lila laughed softly, clasping her hands in front of her. "Well, if you ever need a taste tester, you know where to find me." Nathan watched as the staff responded to her warmth with affection and respect. Despite the veil, Lila had a way of making people feel seen and valued, a trait Nathan hadn't expected. As he turned to leave, he couldn't shake the image of her standing there, her presence radiating an unexpected kindness. The grace and warmth Lila displayed seemed utterly at odds with the distant, enigmatic figure Nathan had imagined her to be. Over the following weeks, he found himself paying closer attention to her, though he would never admit it. He noticed the way she carried herself with quiet dignity, how she subtly but thoughtfully contributed to the household, and the sharp intelligence that surfaced during their rare conversations. One evening at dinner, she surprised him by asking about his work. "How is the merger coming along?" she inquired, her voice steady and genuinely curious. Nathan hesitated, unsure whether to brush her off or engage. Finally, he sighed, setting down his fork. "It's complicated. The other party is still hesitant, despite the adjustments we made." Lila nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps they need more reassurance. Have you considered hosting a meeting here? Sometimes seeing the people behind the business can make all the difference." Nathan blinked, startled by her suggestion. "You think that would work?" "It's worth a try," she said simply. To his surprise, he followed her advice, and the meeting proved successful. The deal closed shortly afterward, leaving Nathan both relieved and quietly bewildered. As the days turned into weeks, Nathan began reevaluating his assumptions about Lila. She wasn't the aloof, impersonal figure he had imagined. Beneath the veil was a woman of intelligence, kindness, and depth, someone who navigated the world with a quiet strength he hadn't expected. Yet, despite his growing admiration, the veil remained an ever-present reminder of the distance between them. One night, sitting alone in his study, Nathan found himself staring out the window, his thoughts consumed by her. She was nothing like he had anticipated, and yet he couldn't shake the feeling that there was still so much he didn't know. For the first time, He wondered if the problem wasn't her reluctance to reveal herself, but his own failure to truly see her. The tension between Nathan and Lila had been building for weeks, an unspoken weight that lingered between them. Despite moments of mutual respect and surprising insight, the veil remained an undeniable barrier. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and long shadows stretched across the mansion, Nathan found himself unable to hold back any longer. He sought her out in the library, where she often retreated with a book in hand. She was seated in her usual chair by the window, the soft glow of a nearby lamp illuminating her veil. "Lila," Nathan began, his tone sharper than he intended. She looked up, her gray eyes calm but watchful. "Yes? We need to talk," he said, stepping closer. Lila closed her book, setting it aside. "What about?" Nathan hesitated, his frustration bubbling to the surface. "Why do you keep hiding behind that veil? Do you think I can't handle seeing you? That I'm too shallow to accept whatever it is you're afraid to show?" Lila's gaze didn't waver, but he caught a flicker of emotion in her eyes. "This isn't about you, Nathan," she said quietly. "Then what is it about?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like a test, like you're waiting to see how long I'll tolerate being married to a mystery." Lila stood, her movements controlled but deliberate. She turned away, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "It's not a test," she said softly. "Then why?" Nathan pressed, stepping closer. "Why won't you let me see you? Do you think I'm not mature enough to handle the truth? Or is it that you don't trust me?" Her shoulders tensed, and for a moment, Nathan thought she might leave the room without answering. But when she finally turned to face him, her eyes held a quiet intensity that stopped him in his tracks. "Do you really want to know why?" Lila asked, her voice steady but edged with something he hadn't heard before. "Yes," he said firmly. "Because I wanted you to see me for who I am," she said, her tone unwavering. "Not for what I look like or what others say about me, but for the person I am beneath all of that. I hoped you might be willing to look beyond the surface." Her words struck him like a blow, their weight sinking into his chest. Lila continued, her voice quieter now. "But it seems I was wrong. All this time, you've been fixated on what you can't see, instead of what's right in front of you." Nathan opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. For the first time, he realized how shallow and judgmental he had been. He had spent so much energy resenting the veil, convincing himself it was a barrier, that he had failed to see the depth of the person wearing it. "I'm sorry," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Lila's expression softened, though her eyes still held a trace of sadness. "I'm not asking for an apology, Nathan. I'm asking for patience and understanding." Nathan nodded, his throat tight. "I've been a fool," he admitted. "I judged you for something I didn't understand and made this about me when it was never about me to begin with." Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "We all have our blind spots," she said. "The question is whether we're willing to see past them." For the first time, Nathan felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that perhaps they could move forward together. "I want to try," he said earnestly, "to really see you. Not just what's under the veil, but everything you are." For a moment, Lila's eyes searched Nathan's, her gaze unwavering. Then, she nodded, her voice soft but resolute. "Then we'll start there." As she turned back to her chair and picked up her book, Nathan felt an unexpected sense of calm settle over him. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, he was prepared to walk it. Not as a man obsessed with appearances, but as someone ready to understand the woman he had married. And though the veil remained, Nathan realized it no longer defined her. It was just one part of a much larger story, a story he was finally ready to learn. In the weeks that followed, Nathan made a conscious effort to change. The conversations he'd had with Lila lingered in his mind, and he began to understand that if their marriage was to work, it required patience and genuine curiosity. One morning, over breakfast, he decided to take the first step. "Lila," he began, setting his coffee cup down, "I've been thinking about what you said, about being seen for who you are." She looked up from her plate, her gray eyes meeting his through the veil. "And I'd like you to be more involved in the business," he said earnestly. "You have a sharp mind, and I think your perspective could really help with a few projects, if you're interested, of course." Lila regarded him quietly, as though weighing his sincerity. Finally, she nodded. "I'd be happy to help." Nathan felt a sense of relief, though he kept his expression neutral. "Great. There's a meeting this afternoon about the Whitmore merger. I think your insights could be valuable." That afternoon, Lila joined Nathan in the conference room for the first time. The executives were visibly surprised to see her, and though their curiosity about her veil was palpable, no one dared to comment. As the discussion unfolded, Lila sat quietly, her hands folded neatly in her lap, listening intently. When Nathan turned to her for input, she spoke with clarity and confidence. "The issue isn't just about profit margins," she said, her voice calm yet authoritative. "It's about sustainability. If you want this partnership to succeed long-term, you need to show the Whitmores that you're invested in their success, not just your own." The room fell silent as her words sank in. Nathan watched as the executives nodded in agreement, clearly impressed. Later, as they walked back to his office, Nathan turned to her, a hint of pride in his voice. "You were incredible in there." Lila tilted her head slightly. "I was just honest." "Sometimes that's exactly what people need," Nathan replied. Over time, Nathan began seeking Lila's advice more often. She had an uncanny ability to cut through the noise and identify the core of a problem, whether it involved a business deal or a personal matter. One evening, as they reviewed a proposal together in the study, Nathan paused to watch her. She was focused, her gloved fingers skimming the pages as she jotted down notes. "You're really good at this," he said, breaking the silence. Lila glanced up, her eyes softening. "I've had good teachers." Nathan smiled, realizing her humility was yet another layer to the woman he was beginning to understand. Their growing partnership extended beyond business. Nathan noticed Lila's subtle kindness, the way she treated the household staff with warmth and respect, or how she quietly left a cup of tea on his desk during late-night work sessions. In return, Nathan began showing his appreciation in small but meaningful ways. He made an effort to ask about her day, include her in decisions, and ensure she knew her presence mattered. One evening, as they sat together in the garden, Nathan turned to her. "I've been meaning to ask," he began, his tone tentative. "Why did you agree to marry me? You didn't have to." Lila was quiet for a moment, her gaze fixed on the flowers swaying gently in the breeze. "Because I saw potential in you," she said finally. "I saw someone who could be more than they realized." Nathan felt a lump rise in his throat. "And have I lived up to that?" Her eyes met his, a hint of warmth in her expression. "You're getting there." Despite their progress, the veil remained a silent reminder of the distance between them. One night, as they sat by the fireplace, Nathan decided to broach the subject again. "Lila," he began carefully, "I don't want to push you, but do you think you'll ever take the veil off?" Lila didn't look away, her voice steady. "When the time is right." Nathan nodded, though a flicker of disappointment stirred in his chest. "I understand. I want you to know that I'm here whenever you're ready." For the first time, Lila reached out and placed a hand on his. "Thank you," she said softly. In that moment, Nathan realized the veil was no longer the barrier he had once believed it to be. It was simply a part of her story, a story she would share when she was ready. And until that day came, he would wait. trusting that the journey they were on together was worth it. The grand ballroom of the Whitmore estate buzzed with energy, alive with the sounds of music, laughter, and clinking glasses. Chandeliers bathed the elegantly dressed guests in warm light, and the evening carried an air of anticipation. Nathan had spared no expense organizing the gala, a celebration of the successful Whitmore merger and the bright future of his growing empire. Nathan stood near the stage, engaged in polite conversation with a group of investors, but his mind was elsewhere. Every few minutes, his gaze flicked to the grand staircase, wondering when, or if, Lila would make an appearance. She had been unusually quiet about her plans for the evening, and her absence was beginning to stir whispers among the guests. "Your wife isn't joining us tonight?" one of the investors asked, his tone polite but curious. "She'll be here," Nathan replied, though even he wasn't entirely sure. Just then, the soft hum of conversation began to fade. All eyes turned toward the grand staircase. Nathan followed their gazes, his breath catching as Lila appeared at the top of the steps. She was dressed in a flowing emerald gown that shimmered in the light, perfectly tailored to her slender frame. But it wasn't the gown that drew the collective gasp from the crowd. It was the fact that, for the first time, her face was uncovered. Lila descended the staircase with the grace of someone who had commanded attention her entire life. Her unveiled face revealed striking features, high cheekbones, luminous skin, and those piercing gray eyes that seemed to hold a wisdom far beyond her years. Nathan stood frozen, his heart pounding as she approached. He barely registered the murmurs rippling through the crowd. "She's stunning. Why would she hide a face like that?" When Lila reached the bottom of the stairs, she paused, her eyes scanning the room before settling on Nathan. She smiled faintly and began walking toward him, the crowd parting like a sea to let her through. When she finally reached him, Nathan found his voice, though it was softer than he intended. "Lila, why now?" She looked at him, her expression calm but resolute. "Because it was time," she said simply. Then she turned to address the room, her voice carrying easily over the hushed silence. "I know many of you have wondered why I've kept my face hidden," she began, her tone steady but tinged with emotion. "Some of you may have assumed the worst, that I was hiding a scar, a deformity, or something shameful. But the truth is far simpler." She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd. "I wore the veil because I wanted to be seen for who I am. Not for what I look like, but for my thoughts, my values, and my actions. Too often, we judge others based on appearances, and I didn't want that to define me or my marriage." Her words hung in the air, and the crowd was riveted by her honesty. Lila turned back to Nathan, her voice softening. "I kept the veil because I needed to know if you could see beyond it. If you could see me." Nathan's chest tightened, her words cutting through every layer of doubt and frustration he had once felt. He stepped closer, his voice low but filled with emotion. "I see you, Lila. I think I always have. I just didn't realize it until now." The room seemed to fade away as Nathan spoke, his focus entirely on her. "I was so fixated on what I couldn't see that I forgot to look at what was right in front of me. Your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. That's what I've fallen in love with." Lila's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her smile was steady. "And I've fallen in love with the man who is willing to grow, to learn, and to see beyond his own assumptions." Nathan reached out, taking her hands in his. "Lila, I don't care what anyone else thinks. I care about you, and I'm grateful every day that you're my wife." The crowd erupted into applause, a few cheers breaking through as the guests celebrated the heartfelt moment. Lila and Nathan stood together, their connection undeniable as they shared a smile that spoke volumes. For the rest of the evening, Lila moved through the room with newfound confidence, engaging with guests and charming everyone she spoke to. Nathan stayed by her side, introducing her to those who hadn't met her and watching with pride as she captivated the crowd. By the end of the night, it was clear to everyone in attendance that Lila wasn't just a beautiful woman who had revealed herself. She was a force to be reckoned with, a partner worthy of admiration and respect. Later, as the last of the guests departed and the ballroom grew quiet, Nathan and Lila found themselves alone on the balcony overlooking the estate. The cool night air carried the scent of fresh blooms, and the stars sparkled above them. Nathan turned to Lila, his voice filled with sincerity. "I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. You deserved better from me." Lila smiled, leaning into his side. "We all grow at our own pace, Nathan. What matters is that we're here now." He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close. "I don't care what happens from here on out, as long as we face it together." Lila tilted her head to look at him, her gray eyes sparkling. "Together," she agreed. As they stood there, gazing out at the horizon, Nathan realized that the journey they had taken, marked by misunderstandings, challenges, and revelations, had led them to this moment. And for the first time, he felt truly at peace, certain that their future was as bright and boundless as the stars above. Nathan and Lila settled into a new rhythm in the weeks following the gala. Their relationship transformed in ways neither of them could have anticipated. The veil was gone, but its absence was only a small part of the profound shift that had taken place between them. Nathan no longer saw Lila as a mystery to solve or a duty to endure. He saw her as his partner, someone who challenged him, supported him, and made him better. In turn, Lila opened up fully, sharing not just her sharp mind, but also her warmth, humor, and the vulnerability she had once kept hidden. Their mornings often began with coffee in the sunlit breakfast nook, where they discussed everything from daily plans to long-term dreams. Nathan found himself looking forward to these moments, not just for the practical insights Lila offered, but for the quiet intimacy they shared. At work, Lila's influence became increasingly evident. Nathan began involving her in key decisions, and her thoughtful perspective quickly earned her the respect of his team. She wasn't content to sit on the sidelines. She actively participated, offering solutions that balanced innovation with practicality. One afternoon, during a crucial meeting, Nathan formally introduced her to the boardroom. "Before we dive into the agenda," he began, standing at the head of the table, "I'd like to formally introduce someone who has been an incredible asset, not just in my life, but to this company. My wife, Lila." The room erupted into polite applause as Lila stood, poised but modest. "She has a knack for seeing things others might overlook," Nathan continued, his voice filled with pride. "Her insights have already made a significant impact, and I'm excited for all of you to work with her." Lila offered a gracious smile. "Thank you, Nathan. I'm honored to contribute and look forward to collaborating with all of you." As the meeting progressed, it became clear that Lila wasn't there as a figurehead. She engaged with confidence and clarity, sparking lively discussions and earning the approval of even the most skeptical board members. Outside of work, Nathan and Lila began exploring their shared passions. They visited art galleries, attended charity events, and traveled to places that inspired them. Through these experiences, they discovered a deep compatibility that went far beyond their initial arrangement. One evening, as they walked hand in hand through a bustling street market during a trip abroad, Nathan turned to Lila with a soft smile. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" he asked. Lila chuckled. "Every day, especially when I remember how much you hated me wearing the veil." Nathan laughed, his expression sheepish. "Guilty, but I'm grateful for it now. It taught me to see you. Not just your face, but everything that makes you, you." Lila squeezed his hand, her voice warm. "And I'm grateful you were willing to learn." Months turned into years, and their bond only deepened. Together, They built a life that blended their strengths and values, creating not just a successful partnership in business but a loving, supportive marriage. Nathan often marveled at how much Lila had taught him, not just about the world, but about himself. She had shown him the importance of patience, humility, and looking beyond surface impressions. Lila, in turn, admired Nathan's willingness to grow, his ability to admit when he was wrong, and his unwavering commitment to their shared future. The final scene unfolded in the Whitmore Enterprises boardroom. Nathan and Lila sat side by side at the head of the table during a pivotal meeting that would set the course for the company's next major initiative. As Nathan opened the meeting, he paused, glancing at Lila with a smile. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to acknowledge my wife, Lila. Her vision has been instrumental in shaping this project, and I couldn't ask for a better partner, both in business and in life." Lila met his gaze, her smile soft but confident. "Thank you, Nathan. And I couldn't ask for a better teammate." The room murmured with quiet approval as the meeting commenced. Later, as they walked out of the building together, the city skyline glowing in the distance, Nathan turned to Lila. "I never imagined this is where we'd end up," he admitted. Lila tilted her head, her eyes sparkling with humor. "Neither did I. But I think we did pretty well, don't you?" Nathan laughed, pulling her close. "Better than I could have ever hoped." As they stood there, their future stretched out before them, Nathan realized the life they had built wasn't just a product of circumstance. It was a testament to the power of understanding, respect, and love. A love that had grown not from first impressions, but from the truths they had uncovered about each other along the way. Their journey was a reminder that love isn't about appearances. It's about seeing, understanding, and valuing the person beneath the surface. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like and share it with someone who could use a little inspiration. And for more incredible tales of love, resilience, and transformation, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time with another story that's sure to warm your soul. And now, goodbye and see you in the next stories.